This is a podcast from Cambridge Assessment International Education. For further information, please visit www.cambridgeinternational.org.
Hello and welcome to the Cambridge International podcast. My name is Melanie Dunn. Today we are talking about applying for college in the US, and I am joined by Youlonda Copeland-Morgan, Vice Provost Enrollment Management at the University of California, Los Angeles, and Logan Powell, Dean of Admission, Brown University. Youlonda and Logan, welcome to the podcast. Please could you start by saying a few words about what your roles entail at your respective universities?
Thank you for having me, Melanie. It's a pleasure to be here. So as Dean of Admission at Brown University, my goal and my responsibility every year was to enroll a class of students from diverse perspectives from all around the world, students who vary by socioeconomic background, by ideological perspective, by academic interest, extracurricular pursuits, bring them all together in a residential community, allow them to learn from each other while they're learning from some of the most distinguished faculty members in the world. It's a great responsibility. It's a daunting one, but it's a fun one at the same time.
Youlonda.
Hi there. Thanks for having me, and Logan, it's great to be with you as well. So my role as Vice Provost for Enrollment Management is to make sure that we're bringing in students who can benefit from the large variety of academic opportunities and co-curricular opportunities that we offer at UCLA. We have a special commitment to first-generation college students, to our returning vets, to former foster youth. And so in that capacity, we create outreach programs that allow them to be exposed to what a university is, what college has to offer, in hopes that many of them will consider UCLA, but also our interest is making sure they go to college. Of course, we have our traditional responsibilities of bringing in that freshman class, and we have a huge commitment as a public institution to transfer students. And so a lot of our efforts are spent, again, recognizing that not every student goes straight from high school to college, and so we enroll more transfer students than any other of our peers in the University of California system. So it's important for us to let students know that if they're not academically mature out of high school, consider going to a two-year college and coming to the college of their choice later.
Okay, thank you. And thank you both so much for being here today. I'd also like to say a big thank you to all our Cambridge International social media followers who sent in your questions for Youlonda and Logan from our schools around the world. We've had a great response. So let's get started. Firstly, we received quite a few questions on the application process. We'll start with the questions relating to the qualifications students need to be able to apply to college in the US. So our first question is from Abrar Hussain, who asks, what English language proficiency scores do you look for in international university applicants?
It's a great question, and the answer will vary a bit depending on the nature of the international school. So, for example, if the international school teaches its courses in English, it may be that any of the additional testing requirements for English proficiency would be waived. If that particular school outside of the UK or the US teaches in a language other than English, it may be that we would look for a TOEFL. It may be that we would look for a Pearson result. It may be that we would look for an IELTS result. But it also means that we're looking at grades in English courses. It means we're looking at scores on the A-levels. It means that we would take into consideration a wide variety of factors, including, in some cases, interviews that may be offered by alumni interviewers or offered on campus. So all of those avenues that may be available for us to assess English ability, the ability to speak, read, and write, we will take a look at. There isn't one test necessarily, I would say, for us. It's always a combination of attributes and qualities that we would consider.
Do you find the same?
Oh, most definitely. I think Logan has covered that very well. And I would just say to students not to worry about English proficiency. Generally, students, particularly international students who want to come to a U.S. university, have been already focused on developing their English skills. And so what I would encourage them to do is to just make sure they're doing their best, that knowing that anywhere that they go, strong English proficiency is important.
Okay, thank you. And our next question, I'll start with you, Youlonda. How well are A-levels recognised at your colleges, and do students doing A-levels need to take any additional AP exams to demonstrate their academic profile?
So U.S. colleges are very much aware of the A-levels. U.S. colleges are looking for students who have taken a rigorous high school curriculum. And so definitely when you're talking about rigor, you have to include the A-level curriculum, the Cambridge curriculum there. And so the recognition is there, particularly in the admissions area, because rigor and how students perform in rigorous coursework is a good indicator of how well students are prepared for your institutions. And so the question of whether they should take AP exams, we believe that students should stretch themselves as much as possible. If they've taken the A-level exams and have done well, then APs become an additional way of complementing the work that they have already done. It's very much an individual choice. We don't want students to overextend themselves, but certainly that if a student, for example, is not happy with their performance in their A-levels, APs are another option for them.
Absolutely. For a student who has been educated in an A-level pedagogy, there's no expectation that they take a totally different exam at the end of that time period. Now, that being said, there are in the United States colleges and universities that require either the SAT or ACT. So for students, the best advice is pay attention to the details that colleges ask for in terms of standardized testing. By and large, if a student has been educated in an A-level system, there's no expectation whatsoever that they take the advanced placement exams in addition to it. We think of the A-level exams as standalone educational features of assessment. So if a student has those A-level exams, plans to take the A-level exams, in nearly every case, that's absolutely sufficient to give us a very good indication of their ability to do college-level work.
Okay, thank you. Could you please say a few words about the course credits that students may receive on the basis of their A-levels?
Sure. So students, I answer this from I think maybe a different perspective, in the sense that at Brown we have an open curriculum which allows students to take courses across the entirety of the curriculum, 80 plus concentrations, which is our word for major, thousands of courses offered, no prescribed distribution requirements. All students do have to pick a concentration and meet concentration requirements. The thing that I like about the open curriculum is its parallels to taking A-level exams, which allows students incredible choice in the humanities, the social sciences, the sciences, maths. So students have that flexibility, and we encourage them to take the tests that will really demonstrate their strengths. What they can then do, in addition to demonstrating their strengths and having it play into the admission process, in many cases it will also grant them credit. It will also waive them out of introductory level classes. So it can do one or the other, and in some cases it can do both, depending on how well they do on a particular A-level exam. So for example, a student who does well on a math exam or an economics exam may actually place out of that course the introductory course at the college level, and perhaps also receive course credit for it at the college level. It will vary a little bit from institution to institution, but it's always a good thing to have strong A-level results.
Yeah, and I would add to that because the credit policy varies from institution to institution, even when the institution considers all of this in the admissions process, that I would encourage students as they're doing their college search in the U.S. that they look at those policies, because institutions will share that their policy explicitly on their websites or in other materials, so the student doesn't have to be surprised by what the college or university's policy is regarding credit for A-level examinations.
Thank you very much. Next question is from Ahmad Imran. If a student has been homeschooled or done their A-levels with a private college or tutor, would they have any disadvantage when applying to a US college?
Well, this is a fun question. The answer is absolutely not. No disadvantages. They are going through the same curriculum. It's not how, it is the fact that they have gone through the A-level curriculum and they've taken the exam and they want to do well on that. There are other aspects of admissions for homeschool students in general that I would encourage students to do, such as make sure they have a well-rounded experience, regardless of whether they're homeschooled or, going to the local community school, demonstrating those leadership abilities and making sure that they are in meeting all of the requirements that fall outside of the academic curriculum that the university is looking for my homeschoolers. But there is absolutely no disadvantage because they've been homeschooled.
And would you say the same for Brown?
I would say the same. The only thing I would add, and I hope Youlonda agrees with me on this, I'm sure she does because we both believe in the integrity of the process. The work the student submits in their application, whether it be to UCLA or to Brown or to any college or university, needs to be their own work. The work they submit in the application should be their own, and it should be factual to the best of their knowledge. So using a private tutor to help prepare for the A-levels is perfectly fine. Using a private tutor or a counselor to help prepare a college application is acceptable, as long as all of the work is still being done by the student. We all need advice, we all need guidance, and so to the degree that a private tutor or counselor offers guidance and advice, that's absolutely fine. But we do hope that the student creates the work that they ultimately submit.
And are there any exam boards that you look upon more favorably than others? And added to that, what is your impression of Cambridge students?
Well, I'll start by saying we're agnostic on exam boards. We understand that students don't always have a choice. Students are very often placed in a curriculum by their parents, by family members. It may be the curriculum that their local high school offers, and they don't have flexibility around that issue. We also understand that students can demonstrate ability in a range of different examination types. So our job is to look at how well students have done in their context. We understand the A-levels very well. We know what the opportunities are. We know that students can demonstrate excellence on the A-levels, and when they do, the chances are that they will continue that excellent academic work when they get to the tertiary level of education. But again, we want students to know that if they work hard in their context, we're going to review them based on the opportunities they've had and how much they've taken advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, so I would just echo that. The rigor is the key here. It is not the program that they choose, IB, AP, A-levels. What we're looking for is for students to engage in a rigorous academic high school curriculum and to do well in that. And then to choose which examinations, in addition to their A-levels, may help them demonstrate that. So it is not necessary, but some students thrive and they want to take AP courses. Maybe they've had that available to them. But I think what Logan has shared is very important for students to understand. Students are not disadvantaged in the admissions process because of a lack of opportunity to engage in certain types of programs. That is key and is a basic and consistent principle, value that we hold across higher education. So the student should do well regardless. As far as Cambridge students, they perform in ways that we expect them to at UCLA. They've taken a curriculum that is aligned with what our faculty are looking for in UCLA students. They come to UCLA, they do very well, and I think my colleagues across U.S. institutions would say the same thing, that if they have taken advantage of the A-levels and have demonstrated proficiency in those courses, then they can choose amongst a number of U.S. options, go to those institutions and do well, both inside of the classroom and outside of the classroom.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that will be very welcome to a lot of our listeners who were asking those questions. And now let's move on to the application process itself. We had a lot of questions about what to include in your application. So one of the questions we saw a lot of was about extracurricular activities, and how do you view these in a student's application?
Well, I think sometimes there can be this misunderstanding or this myth that every student who applies, if they want to be competitive, has to be perfectly well-rounded, that they have to have an equal blend of academic strength, extracurricular activity, and character. And the reality is that we look at all three of those things in any holistic admission environment. Holistic meaning we look at the whole person. We look not just at their test scores, we look at their grades, we look at recommendations, we look at extracurricular activities, we read essays. Everything we can learn about a student, we take into consideration, context being key. So it's important, I think, first and foremost to say a couple things. Number one, there is no list of extracurricular activities that we look at that we think all students should choose from. Students should feel free to engage in whatever they're interested in or whatever they have to do. So, for some students that may be that they're really interested in playing cricket. For other students, it may mean that they have to take care of a younger sibling or they have to work after school to support their families. We don't judge one extracurricular activity over another. We don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. We just want to see what the student has chosen to do and why they've chosen to do it. And I would say, lastly, what they've learned from it. I mean, students can learn lessons doing all kinds of things, whether it's playing a sport or participating in student government, or having to work part-time. All of those things can teach you valuable life lessons, and that's really what we're interested in. So it's important for your listeners to remember there is no checklist, and students don't have to be well-rounded. Students who really devote the lion's share of their time to academic pursuits, that's absolutely fine. We don't look for perfectly well-rounded students. We try to build a well-rounded class, but in doing so, we're going to admit some students who spend much more time on their academic pursuits than their extracurricular pursuits. Or we're going to admit students who don't participate in a number of school-sponsored activities because they don't have time or they don't have opportunity. That's okay as well. The student body we enroll should be interesting and well-rounded, but that doesn't mean that every student is going to be well-rounded.
So one of the things that I would add, and I think particularly coming from a public institution that whose mission it is to provide access to students from disadvantaged backgrounds, whether that be low-income backgrounds or students from neighborhoods where they've had limited opportunity, there are a couple of things I want to say here. One is that it is not the depth of activities that the breadth of activities that you have been engaged in. In other words, you don't have to have a long laundry list of extracurricular activities. And I think some students feel that because of the number of spaces on an application, that they have to fill in every single line and have this long laundry list of activities that they've been involved in. It could be that a student has been interested in one or two areas, dance, for example, and for most of their time outside of the classroom, they've been involved in that art form. that is totally okay. If they choose to spend all of their time in an activity that really reflects their passion, we get excited about that, right? And the other thing that I would say is to encourage your listeners to think about the work that they do at home and in their communities. It may be faith-based related or pertaining to taking care of the elderly, that leadership and extracurricular are not just associated with their high school activities. And we don't want students who have limited opportunities at home to be involved in extracurricular activities to forget that the work that they do at home matters as well. And the actual employed work that they do matters. We realize that many first-generation students have limited opportunities to be engaged in extracurricular activity because they're going to school all day and then they have a job out of necessity after school. And we want them to know we value that. Don't forget to put that on your application, to list that. And again, to share what you've learned. And context, as Logan says, really matters because context helps us to understand how well you've taken advantage of the opportunities that are available to you. But again, I want to speak to those listeners who don't have the opportunities or the finances to be involved in sort of the traditional extracurricular activities that students list. And then the last thing that I would say on this is don't just be a part of the club, be a leader in the club, be the president, be the secretary, be, the coach, demonstrate, take that opportunity for the extracurricular activities that you choose to be in to demonstrate your leadership and to learn leadership skills, right? So if they can have the time to invest in those extracurricular activities as a leader, I would encourage them to do so.
Thank you. So it's about making sure that your application reflects the reality of your life and your values and the things that are dear to you.
Yeah.
So we had also a few questions on the essay that students need to write when they are applying for college. People were asking what they should include in their essay and what are some of the most common essay topics.
This is a great question. I think what would perhaps surprise many of your listeners is that it's not just the topic, it's how the student writes about the topic. So it's always a combination of what they say and how they say it. Students, some of the best essays I've ever read are about topics that are rather mundane. Family dinner, going to a sporting event with their mother or father, delivering newspapers, working a part-time job. None of those topics necessarily would be on anyone's top 50 list to write about for a college application. But the key is what we learn from the essay about the student. So bear this in mind. For most students, when they apply to college, there's only one part of the application where they get to say exactly what they want to say and in exactly their own words, and that's the essay, or otherwise known as the personal statement. So students should remember that this is their shot, this is their chance to tell us who they are and what's important to them in their very own words. The critical piece of advice I would give them is that it doesn't need to be about something extraordinary. They don't need to talk about some remarkable achievement. We understand that in most cases they're 17 and 18 years old when they apply to college. They're still young. Their experiences may be limited, but their story is still powerful. So they should just tell us their story, but that can be about anything at all. So I would say they shouldn't feel confined by topics. They shouldn't look at a list of topics that came from a book and think that all of those topics are good ones. A good topic for a student is something that they care about, something that we will learn more about them by reading in their own words. So that's the best piece of advice I can offer in brief. If I can offer one more piece of advice that often goes overlooked, spell check, proofread, grammar proof, have someone proofread the essay at most, never have someone else write the essay for you, but absolutely have someone proofread the essay.
I think a couple of things I can add for our listeners. One is follow the prompt. If there is a specific question that is being asked, they should make sure that they answer the question. Now, here's what I'm looking for when I'm reading an essay. It doesn't have to be a perfect essay. We're going to get other things that help us to understand that writing skills should be their best effort. But I want to learn something about the student, how they think, what are their values, what did they learn from the experiences that they write about. It's almost as if I could kind of unzip their brain and take a look inside by reading their essays. So they should talk about not what we expect to hear from them, but what drives them? What are they passionate about? What are those experiences that deeply touch their lives, And when I finish as a reader, I should know more about who they are as a person and what they value and what they get excited about, right? Because I already have their grades and their test scores and, other information about their educational context. So this is an opportunity for them to say, this is who I am. And maybe this is what I will bring to your campus, right? But stay away from the sales pitch. Be authentically who you are and let that voice come through in the essay. That is so critical. We don't want it to sound like everyone else because you're not like everybody else. And so there's no expectation, as Logan has said, what you write about, but whatever you choose to write about, make sure it reflects who you are as a person.
So it's about being authentic and then also making sure that it's correct and it's well presented.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So next up, we had a few questions about scholarships for international students. Could you say anything, Youlonda, about how students can apply for scholarships if they are coming from countries outside of the US?
Well, institutions, and we know this is very important, and it's very important to us too, because institutions are looking for a diverse set of students from all backgrounds. So the first thing I would say is you have to do your homework, and that means spending time on the institution's website, on the financial aid page, as well as the admissions page. And if they don't have access to, the web 24/7, go to the college counseling office and just make sure you spend time. Start early. And understanding the institution's policy. Many institutions offer financial aid to international students and explicitly state their policies, and that can range from a full scholarship to partial scholarships for students. But also, it's very important that students look in their local communities because there are a number of foundations and organizations within an international student's local environment that will assist them in paying for an education abroad. I find for international students, one of the biggest challenges for them is remembering to start early, especially because they tend to apply to a large variety of institutions. When students are looking at private institutions, they are more likely to find that those private institutions will meet their full financial need if they come from a background that warrants that, because private school funding comes from different sources, and often endowment plays the amount of monies for our students, our listeners. Endowment is the amount of money that an institution has that generates earnings that they can put into their financial aid programs. Public institutions are generally looking at state funding and more limited endowment funding to help students finance their education. So I would say the key is you've got to look at the specific institutional website. Don't assume that the policy is the same for every institution. Jot those things down. And if finance is a key is extremely important. Receiving those scholarships are extremely important to a student going to a particular institution. They want to make sure they do their homework up front and save themselves a lot of work, because if they're applying to a school that doesn't offer financial aid, and there are some that don't, to international students, then they just want to focus their attention on institutions that both meet their academic needs, the kind of institution they want to be a part of, and make sure that they offer a robust financial aid package so that they're not disappointed in the end.
And I would say it's also important for students to start looking at and knowing the difference between merit-based aid and need-based aid. So there's some terms, there's some financial aid jargon that they should know about. Need-blind versus need-aware, meaning those schools that may look at them and not need to pay attention to whether or not they need scholarship aid versus those that may need to some degree. And then how they allocate their funds. In some cases, that is a merit scholarship. That's something they earn. It could be an academic merit scholarship. It could be for how well they play an instrument or how well they play a sport. It could be a range of things, but merit-based aid recognizes talent in a particular field. Need-based aid goes to families on the basis of what they qualify for financially. But all the institutions they're looking at least if they're looking at institutions in the United States, are required to have a cost calculator, a cost estimator. So students can get a pretty good sense without outside scholarship what it would cost to attend one of the schools they're thinking about. And then they can look to see how much more they might need in scholarships to help make that transition and the 4 years they spend there, or slightly longer sometimes, depending on the degree plan, to see how much they really need to make it affordable for their families.
Okay, thank you. And let's finish up with a few questions on what happens a bit further down the line once students have completed their applications. Syed Hamad Hussein asked, once a student is accepted, is it easy for them to get a visa?
This is another really good question, and again, it depends it will vary a little bit from country to country based on citizenship. We try very hard to make the process seamless, to make it affordable, to make it quick for any student who is admitted to Brown. We have staff members in our Office of Admission, as well as staff members in the Office of International Programs that would help students apply for and receive their visas in time to enroll in the fall. We have a very good track record with this. We do this hundreds of times a year. We've been doing it for quite a long time, so we have a pretty good system worked out now. I think the key is working directly with students. There isn't a one-size-fits-all sort of process when it comes to applying for a visa. Every student's needs may be slightly different, and that's the way we treat it. So we work with every individual student to complete the visa that they need and to walk them through to whatever degree they need our assistance. We're there from them from the moment they're admitted.
So the visa application process is a partnership between the family, the institution, and the school that the student is coming from. And so we all play a role in this. At UCLA, we have the DASHU Center for International Students, so we literally help them plan out their lives from the point of admission through visa through the next 4 years. A wonderful, wonderful global area of our institution. But I would say that students should look into these visa issues so that they're not doing it at the point of admissions, but during their early high school years. If they know that they want to study abroad, get familiar with the visa requirements up front so that the family has time to prepare, to get the right documents so that students are aware. Again, because we want students to use their time efficiently. And a part of that is knowing what the visa requirements are on both sides. But there are staff to help them. And this is so critically important for our international students to know that institutions that are accepting international students have individuals that can help them through that process. It doesn't always have to be a phone call. It can be by email, can send them specific instructions, because one of the things that I've learned in working with our international students, no matter how many times they reviewed your guidelines and the requirements for coming to the U.S., it's a long journey So at each point, they need to revisit the instructions because it can be overwhelming to look at what are the requirements to get in, how do I apply for financial aid, what are the visa requirements, how do I get to orientation. It's too much to absorb at one time. But read through it, and each step of the way, don't forget to ask for help, because we have staff that are specifically hired to help students, international students, with their journey to the U.S. and to make sure that they not only get in, but they thrive. That's what we want for our international students at UCLA. That's what all of my colleagues want, is for their students to come to their institutions and thrive and graduate and become a excited member of our alumni associations.
So it's never too early to be prepared. And finally, our final question for today is, if a student is rejected from their university of choice, what do you advise them to do, Youlonda?
So I would share with them, it doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with their academic preparation or their curriculum. At UCLA, I always say we're too small to take all the wonderful students that apply to UCLA. So understand that most students will be rejected from somewhere. Most students don't have the luxury of being admitted to all of the colleges and universities that they will apply to. So my advice is to focus on where you did get in, and you can always transfer. If you don't get your first choice or second choice school the first time around, transfer is an option. But my experience has been over the last 40 years that students quickly forget why the other school was their first choice, and they do wonderful at the school that they've chosen to go to. So don't take it just as I wasn't good enough. No, there are many reasons why institutions don't admit wonderful students. And most often it's just because we don't have space for all of them. But they will get accepted to wonderful institutions. And as I said, my experience is they will choose one of those institutions and be convinced later, this was the best choice for me.
I don't know that I could have said it any better than that. They will be happy. They'll go to college. They'll go to a great university. They'll have an extraordinary experience. And it's a setback, not an absolute full stop. And I would say it's a relative setback. They may have had their heart set on one particular institution, as my colleague just said, very wisely. Students should apply to the schools they're interested in, and any school they apply to, they should be happy to attend. And I promise them that once they get there, they're going to find a lot to be happy about. They should make the most of it and really enjoy the experience.
And I would just say, if they really want to be Bruins, they can apply to UCLA for grad school.
That was a very positive and encouraging note to finish on. So thank you again to all our followers for sending in your questions. And thank you again very much to Youlonda and Logan for your great advice on applying for college in the US. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning in to the Cambridge International Podcast.
Thank you for listening to this podcast from Cambridge Assessment International Education. For more podcasts and further information, please visit www.cambridgeinternational.org.